This is Jack Donovan. You are listening to Start the World. I'm here today with Brandon Lilly. Brandon is a strength coach and the author of The Cube Method and 365 Strong. He had a long powerlifting career and is regarded as one of the strongest powerlifters of all time. After ending his powerlifting career, he switched gears and he's become known in the strength world and many other circles as just an all-around thoughtful guy who talks a lot about life and motivation and philosophy. You can follow him on his new path at Brandon Lilly 3 on Instagram. And I met Brandon briefly last year, and we've done a lot talking back and forth. So this has been a long time coming. So, Brandon, thanks for coming on Start the World.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thanks for putting up with my technology failures last week. It was a hectic day trying to get that thing sorted out, but glad we're here.
No doubt, I was blown away. It was even a Mac problem.
Yeah, I think so. Just to give you a background, there's a virus of some sort. It's a malware, actually. It's not technically a virus, but it has been proven to be penetrable as far as the MacBooks go, and it just reroutes your browser. Just kind of sends you in a loop. It makes it difficult to undo. And the lady that was on the phone with me was actually kind of cool. She was a supervisor, and she came on very, very, very quickly to assess what it was, because it was a specific type, and she was very familiar with it. Super, super awesome as far as helpful. We got it done in about 5 minutes once we actually got involved, or once she actually got involved. But she was telling me that they're monitoring each individual case because it's adapting and it seems to penetrate just a little bit further through their system. So it's something that she seemed to think that they had very well under control. It's just kind of a pest at this point. So they're trying to backdoor ways to prevent it from getting out of hand. But it was kind of cool to see the power of a company when shit kind of goes bad, and there's potential for loss or potential for blowback. I mean, super courteous, super fast, knew exactly everything to tell me what to do, was even on board with it was an interesting process to see versus the average call of like, hey, can I get a new cell phone or something like that? It's kind of interesting to see how efficient big business can be when they choose to be, or when it saves their ass some money.
Well, obviously, I mean, that's why, if they're doing it right,
for sure.
Cool. All right,
but we're good now, man.
Good. So a lot of people know your story. I've listened to you talk about it on a few podcasts, but a lot of my listeners actually aren't in the strength world or whatever. So can you tell me a little bit about where you've been and what happened and where you're going?
Yeah. So small town kid, grew up in Paint Lick, Kentucky, a little bit outside of the city of Berea, Kentucky. People know that because of the college. Very interesting, segue there into a different story. But Berea College was founded around 1859, and the city grew out from there. And it was founded by a guy named John G. Fee. He was a reverend, and he kind of stood by the ethos of God is made of one blood, all peoples of the earth. And in 1859, in the heart of Kentucky, just south of the Battle of Richmond, he came and started an institution of higher learning that was 50% Appalachian white students and 50% African-American students, in which no student would pay tuition to go there. They would work the land, they would work in the offices and administration, and have their tuition paid and trade for work service. Mm-hmm. So not only do you graduate with a 4-year degree, liberal arts school, number one richest endowed liberal arts school in America, actually, and it's all funded by donation from graduates and so on. But that kind of gives you the context of the town I lived in. It's a really neat place where there's some very, very progressive views, as far as I can remember very early on in the 90s, like early adaptation, especially for Kentucky, some marijuana movements, some gay pride parades, things like that. We have a big PFLAG Foundation, which is Parents for Lesbian and Gay Community. Tons of outreach here, just very, very diverse in a not so very diverse place. We've had some intimate relations with Fred Phelps and the guys out there, coming down here. And
I've heard about that for a long time.
Yeah, picketing. We actually had Matthew Shepard's mother come and speak. Got to meet the Dalai Lama there a couple times. So it's a pretty cool place. To just give you an idea of where I grew up. It is the country, but it's also got a lot of heart and soul to it. I think that probably called to me as much as anything, just meeting a unique set of people at a very early age, and somewhat kind of having to ebb and flow into that world because my mother worked at the college. So I could see myself, at the convocations and learning and stuff as a small child, and then kind of have to come back to school the next day and just be my regular self and stuff like that. So I think my mom, her employment there probably piqued my interest in education and some worldviews fairly early on. So I always had this imagination that I was bigger than this place and I needed to get out of this place. So, I stuck around for college there because that was the one kind of promise that my mom had made all of us, was that she would work there so that her boys could go to school for free of charge. I mean, there's an income exception. So we actually made above the income, but because she worked there, we could actually go to school there. So graduated from there in 2004, really, really deliberated back and forth about leaving to join the military post 9/11, decided to honor my mom's wishes and get the degree. And shortly after graduation, I was working in a wood shop, ended up finding myself, looking towards getting married, starting a career rather than the military. So that was going really, really well. Was working a kind of a career path with General Motors, and got caught up in the 2008, 2009 recession and the rebuilding, restructuring of General Motors. Ended up getting a job at a dealership through General Motors that was a commission job in a recession. And due to that time, I was doing everything that I could. I was, really, really just trying to figure it all out, and got the opportunity to go to West Side and train. That was kind of like when you're hitting rock bottom, or you think that you're hitting rock bottom, you get one of those moments where it's like, oh, the universe is talking to me, or God is intervening here, and you get this call. So the ins and outs of that was I'd really just been all over the place, felt like I'd let my family down, felt like I'd let my friends down, because you're small town, you got to be a working man. And I was just working my ass to death, and I was not getting ahead. So go up to Columbus, start on this powerlifting career, was really, really distracted with a lot of things, trying to balance the fact that I was still living in Kentucky and had family in Kentucky, driving up 3 to 4 days a week to Columbus, Ohio to train, 3 hours up, 3 hours back, leaving at 2:00 in the morning, getting back at 1 in the afternoon, trying to work a second shift. And it was just crazy. And Louis took note of that. I was progressing, but I was turmoil to myself, and I was kind of turmoil to the gym, leaving town, never building relationships, as well as just, you never knew where my head was. I was all over the place, and violence and will to win kind of kept me together enough to perform, but I was falling apart in other ways. And after about 362 days at Westside Barbell, he told me to go get my head straight, figure things out, and let him know if I did. Well, I started training across town at Lexington, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it was Louis giving me the wake-up call that I needed, but that helped me kind of figure the gym back out. Progressed through that, was hitting really good totals, big lifts, and then I kind of had this moment at the Arnold Classic. They had a powerlifting championship, and I had been lifting in competitive powerlifting as a multiply lifter, meaning we got to wear squat suits, bench shirts, and whatnot. And the heaviest bench press I ever did was 832 pounds in a bench shirt. Mm-hmm. And it was actually the easiest bench press that I'd ever done. And a lot of people, I think, that would have excited them, like, oh my God, I can go 900, or I can go beyond 900. Excuse me. And for me, what it really boiled down to was, how am I really testing myself? If the heaviest lift I have ever done is also the easiest, it was so fast that I thought the side spotters took it. I thought that they lifted it off of me. And that's what I'm saying. There was no struggle to it whatsoever. So for me, I used to make this sweeping statement that gear had advanced. I'm saying, for my preferences, for the way that I chose to lift, gear had advanced past my threshold of enjoyment. It was too accommodating to lifters that I felt like weren't as technically sound or necessarily as strong. You could kind of, and listen, that's the same argument that's made for, drag racing a stock car versus drag racing a top fuel. I mean, it takes all kinds. Sure. And when I'm 27, 28 years old, I wanted to fight the world and tell everybody that you're wrong, I'm right, follow me. And I went into raw lifting, and I started to do really, really well in raw lifting. I kind of took on the character mold of, I was an easy villain, I think. And that brought me attention. That brought me a certain endearment from one side. And it was like all the people that I was leaving behind on the other. So it was very easy to rally with the new crowd, and just made a lot of mistakes and things that I said and fingers that I pointed. But fast forward, I was riding waves after wave after wave, and just better and better and better. Exposure was going through the roof. And on January 26th of 2014, I was in LA after winning 2 championships down in Australia in August, and then in November. I'd gone to Mexico, absolutely lived it up, had a fantastic time. Don't think I didn't go 5 minutes without a drink in my hand. It was a celebratory trip, coming back from Australia and stop in Mexico and spend a week. I mean, it was a really beautiful time in a world, in a timeline of mine that was chaos. And I go to LA, kind of all eyes are on the competition because it's the LA Fit Expo. I had done several things for that competition that I would have never done. One, I didn't do a full prep because I'd been in Australia and Mexico. I cut weight because a guy directly challenged me, and I thought, well, I can win outright, but going head to head with another guy, and cutting weight and not having this training, like I was building hurdle after hurdle to justify to myself that it was a bigger win than what it was if I had indeed won. So I take my first attempt, squat it, take my second attempt, squat it, but it was 744 pounds. It was a little bit high. And I thought, you know what? I'm feeling some groin tension. I'm going to kind of widen my stance back out, give myself some more glute and hip or hamstring recruitment, kind of save the groin. Soon as I stepped back, I widened my stance. And that was just, I mean, looking at it now, it was just momentum and adrenaline that made that decision. But my groin exposed, as far as it just opened up more. The adductor pop, pulled, whatever it was, and then the knee snapped in the left knee and rotated inward, and the bar stayed on my back, and we went to the ground. Both my ankles rolled out, both knees snapped. Once I hit the ground, sounded like Rice Krispies. And on the right leg, it was quad tendon, patella tendon. Ankle was sprained, not broken. Left leg, it was quad tendon, patella tendon, ACL, MCL, meniscus, and PCL. Literally the thing, and my kneecap had actually retracted somehow, some way, about 5 inches north of where it should be and about 4 inches to the outside of my quad sweep, so much that it actually cut through my quad muscle. And wow. the kneecap was just kind of embedded there. Like, I literally remember laying down, I was in knee sleeves, and I look over and there's this bulge sticking out at the top. And that might have been the issue there too, because they were so tight, it might have pressed them out and up. I don't know. Right. But I looked down and I said, what is that? And the guy behind me that was like trying to keep me calm with his hands on my shoulders, which by the way, did not keep me calm. He was like, bro, that's your kneecap. And I was like, let me walk it off. I was just out of my mind, right, and then I woke up the next day and I was double casted, and they told me, they're like, you're probably done lifting. You'll be lucky if you can walk in 10 months. And if you can ever squat again, consider it a miracle. Well, 10 months to the day, I was back in Australia competing at the GPA Worlds, where I did squat 660, I benched 551, and I pulled 727 or so. It was like a 1968 total, which is still, very, very, at the time for that event, it was a very good total. I think I finished second that day, but actually on broken knees or repaired knees and infected. I was my knee was absolutely swollen to the size of, it looked like a cantaloupe under the skin. And they had to cut I'll actually send you a picture, but at my last deadlift, I got my hands out like I used to do, kind of zombie style. And you can see where I'd cut the knee sleeve because the leg had already started to swell. So I had to have surgery before I could return home from Brisbane. And on the flight home to Chicago, the pressure in the cabin changed, and it caused my knee to rupture, the skin to rupture, the stitches to swell, or the skin to swell and the stitches to rupture and tear. So I'm in the airport in Chicago, literally a 48-minute flight from home, and I've got my leg wrapped up, and a lady sees the blood like coming down my leg. So I had to go to the bathroom. I had to buy a new pair of pants at the store that said like Chicago, the Windy City, or some bullshit down the leg, and I had to basically just wrap my leg in an entire roll of paper towels and put the old pair of pants on over that to keep it in place, and then put the sweatpants on so I could get on with no blood like visible, because they wouldn't let me fly. And I was due to have surgery the next day. I'd already called my doctor. So all that is told to tell you that over the, from January 26th of 2014 to probably, I want to say, yeah, it was July of 2017, I think. Yeah. I had 18 surgeries on my knees, just for an unwillingness to quit or submit to the fact that my body was begging me to stop lifting heavy weights. I could go to 400, 500 just fine. But when I would start creeping into the 600s and the 700s and so on, I would get an infection. My body would shut down. And the last time when it kind of really hit me that I was probably done lifting, at a competitive level anyway, I, kind of had a working relationship with my doctor to the point where I could text him, and he was like, literally, see you at the hospital at 7:15 in the morning. I'll bump you to the front of the line. We'll get this done. I mean, I wouldn't say we were friends, because he was kind of an asshole, but he was a good surgeon. And this will tell you how much he cared about me. He came back right as they were getting ready to put me under, 5, 4, that kind of moment, But I said, hey, doc, you're going to get me cleaned out. You're going to fix me up. And he said, Brandon, I want you to know that if you wake up without a leg, I saved your life. And then it was like,
I don't know if I want to hear that right before I'm going to sleep, but all right.
Oh, dude, it was terrifying. I mean, it was terrifying. I can remember the tears like coming in my eyes, and that kind of feeling, you get the dry mouth almost instantly. And then they put that mask on me. And when I woke up, I saw my leg, and I was literally almost as happy as I could ever remember being.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, that was a very, very unique reset point for me, because the only times that I felt happiness before that were really, I mean, prior to that, I can remember being 12 years old and being happy. And then everything went weird. I became a really good athlete. I got recognized for being athletic. That kind of set me on the fast track of, you no longer have friends, you have teammates kind of thing.
Okay.
So my world just evolved from there. And I just chased sport forever. For 20 plus years, I chased, whether it was soccer, swimming, diving, running, endurance races, powerlifting, whatever it was, I've run the gamut, and I've always been pretty adept at what I picked up. So I can remember in this moment, like, man, it's all dwindled down to I have my leg. Like, I have my leg. And I was like, I owe it to my leg and to my doctor and to my family and friends that have put up with me through this whole roller coaster to really do something about it. But I tell you that, again, I kind of break for a second to tell you that when I fell, my parents, my family had no idea where I was competing. They had never seen me compete. They've still never seen me compete, except very, very early on when I was young. I let my drive to be the best at something consume, hey, we're having Thanksgiving dinner at 12. Well, guess what? I'm training at 12. So sorry, see you next year.
Right.
Christmas is at 5 p.m. Oh, guess what? I'm squatting at 5 p.m. Well, see you next year.
Mm-hmm.
And it just became this retraction, thinking that, that was the grind, that was the dedication that it took, that was the isolation that it took from all these other things that mattered. Well, when I fell and my phone was filling up with people saying, oh, I love you, I'm so sorry to see you fall, we're rooting for you, blah, 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 and it's total strangers, and my parents don't even know to call.
Mm-hmm.
That was a pretty damning point. So when I got home from my first surgery, my dad walked in, and I'm double casted, of course, and I'm in a wheelchair. He didn't even know where I live at that point. So he came in the house and talked to me, and he said, I want to tell you two things. First and foremost, whatever put us in this place where there's this kind of distance, I'm sorry. And he said, I should have told you, secondly, that I love you and I'm proud of you every single day of your life. And I looked at him, not really fully ready to admit it, like still proud and full of ego and piss and vinegar. But there was something that kind of broke in me that said, if my dad can change from the person, and my dad was never cruel, he was never out and out mean, he was hard, he was firm, and he worked a lot. And when he would come home, he got the rundown from mom, gave me the discipline, put me to bed, and that was it. Like, that was my dad. And when I was a kid, I couldn't see it. I hated him for it. But as an adult, I see, man, we had a roof over our head. We had food on our table every night. So all these things that I resented about my dad, because other kids' dads were home throwing ball with them or playing this or that, playing that, my dad was doing his best. And in that moment, for him to come and say that to me, that was the first pebble in the pond to really kind of wake me up to change. Finding out that I still had my leg was like the second, okay, motherfucker, here's the stone that is going to wake you up and create the ripples and waves that will change your life. So on the heels of that, my first goal from that last surgery, there's a hill that I used to climb forever and ever here in Berea, and it's at the Pinnacles. If you ever want to look it up, it's the East Pinnacle in Berea, Kentucky. It's absolutely gorgeous. That was my thinking place. That was where I would go when I was a kid. And like, if I wanted to smoke weed for the first time, or, you know, if I just wanted to get away from everybody for a few minutes, that's where I would go. And because of powerlifting, I didn't hike it. Like, I thought it was just calorie, you know, it was caloric consumption to go up there and hike that. And I had no desire to be in shape. I had no desire to be anything other than strong. So I omitted that vision from my life to the point that I would actually drive opposite routes to not pass it, you know. And especially after my injury, when it was just an impossibility. So my mind really started to change about how I looked at myself and I looked at the world, and I stopped being, you know, result driven, and I started being more process driven. Because forever it was like 5 more pounds is the only reason we train. No, I used to train to get that feeling and that happiness and that pump and that overwhelming feeling of accomplishment. And now I could do all of that, but if I didn't hit a PR at the end of my cycle, I felt like a failure.
Right.
So I took the joy from the process and only put the joy in the result. Flip flop, I go out to this hill and I tell myself, doesn't matter if it takes you 24 hours, if it takes you 48 hours, you're going to get up there. If you have to crawl, like literally, how bad do you want to see this view? And the truth of the matter is, up until that point, I didn't, because I just was lazy. You know, I was telling myself, you can't do it. But the fact of it is I was afraid. So I get down there and I start, and I got it done in about 3 times that it takes me to do it normally. I get up to the top and just overcome with pure emotion. Like, I would imagine it to the same kind of feeling that a kid, when they still believe in Santa Claus, you know, and they're running downstairs and it's like, he remembered me. He brought me these things, you know, and that's kind of what it was for me, except it was flip flopped in that I remembered how good it felt to be up there. I remembered those sunrises and those sunsets, and I remembered why I would go up there. So from that point, it was like, I'm 348 pounds. I've had 18 knee surgeries. I'm no longer any resemblance of who I used to be. Like, who is this guy sitting here? So I had a really, really long conversation, and it's kind of funny that we're having this conversation right now, probably because I thought about it this morning. But I made a post on a page that I'm running on Instagram where I just give free workouts every day, and it's a picture of an espresso cup, you know. And I was sitting there this morning with why on my mind, and I went back to that moment, you know, like this was the beginning of my whys, like to get outside and to do the things that 12-year-old boy used to love to do, which is hike and ride his bike and go camping and whitewater rafting and all these things that I already had in my life. And for 20 years, from 12 years old to 32, I chased everything but the things that brought me the most joy. You know, I was looking for people to like me. I was looking for people to, you know, rally around me and celebrate me. They did when I lifted a barbell. And it was like, when I was lifting a barbell, I got all of that. But I was the guy that still came home and couldn't have a real conversation without somebody saying, hey man, what do you bench? Like, how much do you squat? Talk about training. Like, hey man, I got this weird pain in my shoulder. Like, what should I do for, you know? And like, at some level you start to buy into that because it's easy. It's easy. And it's like, it's ego filling, but it wasn't fulfilling. And I needed to kind of remove myself from that. So my coaching clients changed very much. I just kind of lost the interest. I still work with a few, but I still, overall, it's because I care about those people, not I care about their PRs. That sounds kind of weird, but I'm more invested in them as people, and understand that their powerlifting pursuit is wholesome. Like, they're not leaving their families. They're not disrupting their lives to be good at the powerlifting that they're doing. But most of my clients have kind of been powerlifters or out of shape for a number of years, and they're trying to get back to a place where, hey, how can I be a better man? How can I be a better wife? How can I be a better son and daughter and these kind of things? And that selfishly has helped me by creating a culture of clientele that's on a similar path. Like it's not like I'm sitting here at the chariot, like I'm the master, follow me. It's more like I'm interested in going this direction. Who's willing to walk this walk with me? Who's willing to tell me some things that might help me along? So my clientele base really diversified. I stopped putting out a lot of information because I told you before we started here, I hated being perceived as an expert. And I will fight for the fact that I think I am an expert when it comes to powerlifting, 3
Sure.
lifts, squat, bench, and deadlift. But I was getting grouped into other conversations as an expert with people who were doing really, really high level scientific work, really, really high level, in the gym, hands-on training kind of work. And I just started to feel like a fraud. I felt like I was very much cast in this light positively, but I kind of resented it because I felt dishonest about it. So I needed to retract myself maybe as an expert and as a viewpoint, and then come back and show you, hey, I'm going to do this 100,000 meter row to support these kids with autism and these veterans that are coming home trying to have some transition. I want to call awareness to that by putting my name to it so that I have accountability, because I sure don't want to row today. But I still had enough of that ego drive that it helped me get to that finish line. So I've learned to kind of have this delicate dance with ego and pride, where they can both propel you forward and pull you backwards. So I kind of have that why conversation a lot during the days. But these days I am working for Sornex exercise equipment on the education side, kind of on the outdoor side. So guess what? I've come full spectrum and found a company that believed in me enough to allow me to utilize the education side of my knowledge base for strength training, talk to other coaches, talk to other athletes. And then on the flip side, we have Sornex Outdoors, which isn't really a product of anything. It's more a shared experience of camping, hiking, shooting guns, going hunting, shooting your bow, whatever it may be that involves the outdoors. So I'm getting enrichment from both sides. I'm getting enrichment from my clientele. My family's back involved. I don't think that any of that would have happened at the trajectory that it has had I not had my injury. So point of injury, suicide attempt a couple years later, 5 years later, we're sitting here talking about how good life is. So if anybody might hear this, I give you some stick in the ground that there is tomorrow. Like there's days beyond this moment. And that's really what my message is just trying to help people live a little bit better, live a little bit easier on themselves, forgive themselves from some shit that they did, and try to love everybody that they can that's deserving of that love.
Cool. I mean, it's interesting. Like one thing I thought when I was listening to some of your other podcasts and so forth is that it is a strange balance, I think, for people, because if you really look at anyone who's gotten to the top of anything, there is that myopic, like they kind of have to throw everything to the side and you're just going to do that one thing and be the top of that thing.
Yeah.
But we go.
No, I just think I think that's kind of a young man's game. I don't tell people I don't tell people to shy away from that entirely. I mean, if you can find this thing that rocks your world and maybe puts a little money in the bank and doesn't detract from your ethos, fuck yeah. Burn the candle at both ends in your 20s. Make that company work. Make that business grow. Make your life better. But at some point, allow yourself to say, look, this is not sustainable forever. And for some people it is, but I think the overwhelming unrest in this country comes for people doing things in timely fashions that they don't agree with. They start the family too early rather than starting their business, growing their business, being able to delegate, and then starting the family, or starting the family and never starting the business at all. Whatever it is, like I think people can get really frustrated. So one thing I have started to do more of myself is really, really invest in trusting my gut, trusting who I am, trusting what my intuition tells me, and following that. And when I tell you that I am still equally as driven towards the very things that I care about, I still have that same passion. I'll still get up at 3:00 in the morning to go hiking. I'll still do whatever it takes to achieve my goals. I feel like that is a privilege of living in the United States, is that whatever you want to do and whoever you want to become, there is a step-by-step procedure to get you to that point.
Mhm.
and I can become singularly focused on any one of those things. I have just learned a process that allows me at 3 o'clock or at 5 o'clock or at 7 o'clock or whatever time I dedicate, I can put it down for the day. I don't have to carry that with me to the dinner table. I don't have to carry that with me when I go to the movie or the concert or this, that, and the other. Like, I've really just accepted that. Is it really grinding if you take 12 hours to do what you could do in 4? So I take pride in doing a lot of work in a condensed time so that I can live my life outside of that work spectrum. And beforehand, I always thought that it was like, if you were living and breathing, you should be working
Mhm.
and you should be posting and doing this kind of stuff. And like I said, I agree with that to a point, and I lived that to a point, but my body physically broke at 32, which I think shifted my mentality at 32. And I think it brought me back into a calibration point where I should have been. Like at 32, I should have been thinking about my exit strategy, because at 25, the whole lingo that I gave people was, yeah, I want to do this till I'm about 30. And then I just want to kind of transition out, do some Highland games and strongman stuff,
Sure.
remain active, but not necessarily competitive. So I was already lying to myself by continuing to go. But
Mhm.
I was so wrapped up in my wave. I was so wrapped up in that progression that I didn't say, hey, slow down, reassess. You're going 7, 8 events where you're lifting maximally in a year. That's going to add up to disaster. What if you scaled this back to once or twice a year for the next 3 or 4? Then you can extend it out. But I wasn't having those conversations. I was living and competing, and really all my relationships looked like I was ready to use you as much as I could and then burn you and just go on to the next one and the next one and the next one. There was no thought process. It was all reactionary.
All right. So you said that you should have noticed that you were at the end of your career, and that you were reacting to things.
Hmm.
And was there a situation where you weren't getting good advice or just not willing to take it?
Definitely not willing to take it. I mean,
Mhm.
at that point in time, you have to understand, I think my psychology was all the great lifters, beyond injury, beyond, you know, downfall, personal struggles, whatever it was, the lifters that I looked up to were still banging it out. You know, the Louis Simmons, the Chuck
Mhm.
Vogelpols, the guys that lifted well into their 40s, and like Louis into his 60s, and 70s now. I mean, he's not competing, but I always kind of had that mentality. I never set out to win trophies and set records. I just really truly wanted the respect of my peers. You know, I kind of know those guys in gyms that are never going to lift the most weight. They're never going to have the greatest physique, but they're always like just a loyal, badass training partner, somebody that gets after it, somebody that really epitomizes what it means to just kind of be a blue collar, like bodybuilder or blue collar power lifter. And I romanticize that so much that even in medical advice, in psychological advice, you know, anybody that was willing to give me support, I was more tied to that romanticism of who I thought I should be or what I had to be to really become, quote unquote legendary. Um, and I just did not heed any advice whatsoever that was worthwhile until after the fact, when it was just, I was really, really starting to see the breakdowns. And I mean, things that I've come to grips with and I've shared very, very close with, with people very close to me. But man, there were dark days in there. Like I talked about earlier, there was definitely a day where I did not want to live. But I think even on the heels of that, while I admitted to myself, yes, I want to live, I want to be here, I want to progress. The actual physical situation that I was living in continued to deteriorate for another few months. So, and I think that was a really hard time too, because it's like, okay, I've turned this corner. I actively want to live. I actively want to improve my life and myself. And it just seemed like and it's really just momentum. Looking back at it now, the things that transpired over the next 2 to 3 months were already set in motion 6 or 8 months ago. It's kind of like I tell people, I want to lose weight, or I want to get out of debt, or I want to change my life, whatever it is. I try not to be motivational in that, because motivation wanes, and the motivational speeches, while they're good for the moment, they might get you through today. You have to really start to dig that out of yourself and have intrinsic motivation, intrinsic vision of who you want to be and what you want to be. And I just could not get it going just yet because the momentum from all my actions prior were still having their echo effect. And finally, once I kind of got to the point where there was still like nothing bad was happening, nothing good was happening, that's when I was really able to make the turn and see that, okay, if it takes 1,000 negative choices to get you in the hole, it's going to take 1,001 to get you out. I just needed that moment to breathe and to really look at my life and say, what does that need to look like? What do I want to do? And I had, like I said, I had no idea why I wouldn't listen to people, but my dad, speaking of him again, he made a very, very good point to me. He said, son, I want you to think about this. Have I ever given you bad advice? Have I ever given you advice that you wish you hadn't taken? And I said, no. And he said, you're just one of those people that lives too close to the flame. He's like, you are Icarus with the wings.
Mm-hmm.
You go too close to the sun and you burn out. He was like, that's okay. And I think that makes you unique in who you are, but use a little bit of this perspective that people give you, kind of weigh it all out. So, it was several things that happened over time. Relationship, definitely melded with my father, with my parents. And I started to understand and trust the fact that they had my best interest rather than I had to prove them wrong. I had to outperform them. I had to out earn them kind of thing. I don't know where the chip on my shoulder came towards my parents necessarily, other than the fact of what I just told you. They were young when they had me. They both worked their asses off. There wasn't a lot of that parental interaction, but there was definitely a ton of love. And I think just the kind of person that I am, looking at some of my relationship skills or deficiencies, I think I'm a person who needs a lot of, affection, whether it be standing here in the kitchen and cooking with someone, sharing that kind of affectionate moment where it's intimate and it's connected, or whether it's cuddling on the couch or holding hands in public, whatever it is. Like, I like those acts of affection. And that was just not something that was really in my house. So, we grew up kind of tough, but all being said, my parents never stopped reaching out for me. They never stopped believing in me, even when I was kind of off doing my own. And now, like today, we were following some trees with my dad, my brother and I, and it almost seems like that time in my life was just this huge pause button. And I think, how lucky am I to have done the things that I've done because of a time that was like totally fucked up, like where everything was off kilter. But kind of, there was enough going on in the middle there that was enough to like propel me into a career of speaking or coaching or education, whatever it may be. So this time that I used to look at with a lot of regret and guilt and anger, I've kind of, time heals all wounds, and I've made amends with a lot of people within the sport that I made enemies with. I've apologized to a lot of people I needed to apologize to. But for myself, I think, man, I've just redefined what I think strong is. Strong has many modalities, Alex Honnold being one in free solo, climbing that mountain for 4 hours, that facing for 4.5 hours. There's a serious group of people in strength sports that would look at that and tell you that, well, can you unrack 1,000 pounds? And it's like, but you know what I mean? There's that.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that I probably held some of that viewpoint too. Like, okay, you can have your argumentative strengths, but 1,000 pounds is 1,000 pounds. 800 pounds is 800 pounds. And like, it always goes back to the body weight. Like, well, strongest pound for pound, that's cool. But if you got an 800-pound rock, who you calling, me or the 165-pound guy? That was the rock that I stood on. That was the sword that I died by. There's no weight classes in the jungle quote, which was not necessarily me being braggadocious. It was more trying to get my clients to see, hey, stop this madness with the weight cutting. Stop this madness where you're diminishing an entire training cycle, trying to make a weight class that you shouldn't be in anyway. This is your first or second meet. That's where it was derived from. Mm-hmm. But when it was kind of presented back to me as like, okay, this is your bravado, this is your swagger kind of thing, I jumped all over it. I was susceptible to an image that I was trying to uphold. And I think that we all try to hold an image to some level, but like, this was the yin to my yang. It was totally, I'm a very nice guy. I'm a very loving guy. I'm a very quiet person. And I was this loud, brash, tattooed, kind of thing. And not to say that those things aren't part of me, But when all of those things came to the forefront, and all of the good that I really know that I contain and believe in went to the backside. Nobody got to see those things. So when it kind of started to ebb and flow out, throughout my injuries, throughout my surgeries, people started to, I lost a lot of the following that I'd gained, but I started to realize that following never mattered anyway, because after my injury, the support wasn't there either.
Right.
So I started to realize that, okay, and I was so foolish, man, like in so many ways. You mentioned the cube method, which is a method that I penned, and it really wasn't even intended to be a book. So don't buy it. Like, do not buy the book.
Okay.
Just Google it. And the PDF is out there for free. And I only say that because I'm not proud of it as a work, as a book. It's information that's digestible. It's information that's usable, and it's definitely made a lot of people stronger. I stand by that, but I do not stand by the fact that, again, I'm an English major. And not that means jack shit, but it's like I have an understanding of the language. I have an understanding of what it takes to really write a research paper and do the depth of work to make something quality and publishable. And what this really was journaling that turned into a blog, that turned into, hey, expand on these blogs and make this a little bit more of what it is. And now it's a product, and that's okay. Like, I was young, I was dumb. We were kind of the Wild West on the internet there. And I put that out there. Like I said, I truly believe in the work. I just do not believe in the work that I did at a level that I should have had a standard to. So definitely get the book if you're interested in rotations of intensities and things like that. But just realize that it is not something that I would be proud. And this is when I knew, when I took the job with Sornex, Pop Soren asked me about it. And I was like, I do not want this man to see it, and that, it was like, for the first time in my life, I kind of had those feelings again of like guilt or regret, and I think for so long, I just didn't feel those things because it was 100 miles an hour forward and never look back, because you burned all the bridges on the way, and I think for me now, I do owe the people that believe in the cube, and I think the cube method itself, I believe that I owe at least myself the right to do it better. But I'm trying to figure out a way to honor the people that paid for it the first go round or something like that. Like, I don't know what it is. And hell, it just may be free anyway, all across the board, but it might open to some doors to different seminars or speaking or whatever. But I don't need a product. You know what I mean? I just want good work out there. I want good messages out there. That's why my friend Casey and I started Peace, Love, and Meat. It's a page dedicated to a daily training WOD. I'm trying to remove barriers of entry for people that are getting their life back in shape. Like, I don't know what to do in the gym. Well, here's a workout every day. I don't know what books to read. Well, here's a list of 10 books. I don't know what foods to eat. Well, here's how to cook a better steak than you'll eat at Outback, or whatever it is, just right. Small ways that people can slowly progress forward and hopefully get out of whatever shit they're in and start to see that life doesn't have to be big and bright and flashy, that it can be good with good people, good experiences, and good places. So I'm just dedicated to that end. I mean, Bert Soren, that's kind of his ethos, get a bunch of good people together doing cool things in cool places. And for me, those cool places don't have to be anywhere else than where I am. Like, I try to cultivate people. I try to cultivate conversation. And I think on the heels of all that I've been through, I think that I can be an everyman, as far as there's something that somebody could tell me and I can relate to it in some way. And if all that pain and if all those years took to get to that point where I can be more empathetic and more understanding of people around me, and also not just empathetic, but also active in helping them improve or helping them get better, then man, that's all worth it, because it was 10 years for 100 is what I hope, trying to live forever over here.
Yeah. Well, wherever you were got you to where you are.
Sure.
And, that's, the Nietzsche thing, amor fati, like love your fate.
Yeah.
I think that actually that was a piece of advice that my dad gave to me. He said something along like, well, there's no point in having regrets, because, and at the time I was like having some regrets, and I was like, I wish I wouldn't have done this. I wish I would have done this in my life or whatever. He's like, no, you're working with the best information that you had at the time.
That's something that really set me free, as far as relationships, because I was just perpetually awful,
Mhm.
in the way that I expected everything, not, I shouldn't say this in a bad way, but I expected every woman to be my grandmother, like just very, very, like she was just on it,
Yeah.
doing everything, running a house, running a business, just on it. And that was my fault, setting expectations too high. But also, I think for me, I just needed to understand that, you know, the failure of my relationships was due to the fact that I was in poor relationships. I didn't take time to understand why they failed. It was always right on to the next one and right on and on and on. And I'm kind of a person, I realized that I need that 50-foot perspective. I need to get away from things for a while
Mhm.
to really think about myself and think about, okay, why do you think she left, asshole? Well, because you treated her this way for this many months and this and that. And it was like, I never admitted to myself that I was abusive, in the fact that like I said, I expected everything and I gave so little, and it doesn't have to be shouting. It doesn't have to be a punch to the face.
Right.
This slow degrading kind of, quote unquote, the Chinese water torture of like, gimme, gimme, gimme. I'll give you whenever I feel like it, kind of thing.
Right.
And when I realized just how selfish I was, not only in that, but in, my powerlifting, I burned through training partners. I was just a consumer, just consume, 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 to the point now that it's like, I just want to give and give and give. But through that giving, somehow it balances me out to where I feel better. Like I feel like I'm capable of receiving more because I'm giving more. It's just a nice flow. And that sounds all hippy dippy and, and whatnot, but it really is true. I mean, I never thought that I would find myself in a place where people are looking to me for guidance on how to improve your life, because man, there were years where I was begging for help and didn't know who to ask.
Yeah.
I was looking for answers that I could not find because I was too proud to ask the questions.
Yeah. It's the pride. And also, I think that you really do become a product of the people that you surround yourself with to a certain
Hmm.
degree. And if you're surrounded yourself with people that are just going after this one thing or just want you for that one thing, um, you're not going to get as much good advice, and you're not going to get the right influences. And you also, I mean, all of us. I mean, I'm a pretty individualistic guy,
Hmm.
but I can I can take on what's around me and
Right.
absorb it to a certain extent, and absorb that kind of energy, and uh, adapt to that.
Right.
And so I think what you mentioned it earlier, and we've both kind of been talking about it, is that you need to pick the people around you very selectively.
Oh, I think that has been probably the most crucial thing in my life, is that for the first time in my life, I really, really feel like I have a group of friends that we text almost every day.
Mhm.
Um, we see each other. We don't live in close proximity necessarily, this core group of people, but it's people that I see sprinkled throughout my year. Like at least once a month, I'm finding a group of one or two of them somewhere, and we're doing things, and it's getting me through. But it's that constant. And I think for me, like I said, I kind of forgave myself on the front of the inability to make friendships, because I never had to work those skill sets. Because as a young man, and this kind of comes back to the point, my dad, I think it was my dad or my uncle, he told me, he was like, if you were to go out and build a house today, assuming that you'd never built a house, how good would it be? Well, I can make it look like it, but when the wind blows, it's probably going to fall over, right? But
Right.
if you build a house every day for 10 years, you kind of learn some shortcuts and some tricks and some improvement. And that's what he was saying. He was like, look, the failures that you're telling me about were in your third relationship, like your fourth relationship. Not that you need to go through 100 relationships to find success, but I'm still pretty early in the game. I need to really take some time and understand who I am. I'm not the same guy that was making those same mistakes at 16. So why are the mistakes the same? Why am I still doing the same things? So when I really started to get some space and allow myself some time to look and understand myself, I literally just looked at as myself as a skill builder. Like okay, this is not working. This hasn't worked in the past. Let's try something different. And then it just became this kind of, okay, this feels more like it should. This feels good. This feels more like me. And it just became this like, and again, I think it's all momentum. When you start to gain the confidence and you start to gain the trust in yourself to make better decisions, then you gain momentum and good decision making. You do more things. You're more productive. You're more effective because you're starting to weed out that process. And that's where I am right now. Like, I know when I'm home, my process, my training, my diet, everything is dialed in. But when I travel, that's where I'm still learning, because before, when I maybe had a bigger name and was a bigger draw to the bigger people, the travel was accommodated, the food was accommodated, like everything was planned out for me. I was just like an infant. I was a child that was told where to go, and I show up and it's like, okay, here's your plate, sir. Here's your, perfectly done ribeye steak and whatever. And I mean, it was just, I became so spoiled by the success that I had achieved. I didn't even really get to relish it. So now I'm like, let's not go to the restaurant. Let me cook for you guys. Even when they bring me out, it's like, that's something I love to do.
Mm.
And that's something that really endears me and them. Like, it's a situation now. It's a moment rather than, oh yeah, you remember the restaurant we went to? No, it's like, hey, we had dinner here together. You fix this. It's a celebration of whatever this is. So I just try to immerse myself more into other people in that way. And then automatically you cook somebody a good ass steak, like they're going to give back to you, whether it's through stories or it's, pouring you a nice whiskey or something like, I mean, it becomes a very natural exchange. And for years I was not accustomed to that because I did not know how to make friends, because every season my friends changed based on the sport. And I was implanted with, okay, here's your friends for the next 3 months. These are your soccer friends. And then like after soccer season, I wasn't hanging out with them after school. I wasn't spending night on Friday night. I was with the basketball kids.
Mhm.
Well, it put me in a weird place in high school, and I kind of found myself in a weird place many times as an adult. But you know what? It changed for me when I met Mike DeSanti, and he was like, well, if people aren't calling you, start calling people. He's like, if people aren't inviting you to the party, throw your own damn party. And I really bought into that and just putting more effort into texting people that mean something to me, letting people know where they stand in my life. If I don't hear from someone, maybe it's not because you're the greatest thing in the world and they should call you. Maybe you should call them,
Right.
that kind of thing. So again, it all somewhat circles back to that ego and pride, which are buzzwords, cliche words thrown around a lot. But I really think for me, that's what it was. And I mean that honestly. Like I said, I kind of walk that fine edge sword of, yeah, they're useful and they have made me successful, and they continue to make me successful because I'm proud of my life. I'm very much driven by success and fun, but it doesn't have to be at others' expense. And I think that for me is the healthiest place I've been. It's like, I'm not going to step on anybody's throat to get better, but I'm definitely going to help somebody up if they're down. And when they get back on their feet or when they get better, they come back around and help. I mean, some of my friends now are just people who've been at rock bottom when I was up, and when I was down, they were on top. And I mean, it's just, you need people. And I'm so lucky for the people I have in my life, man. It's a total game changer for me. Feeling like I was taking on the world by myself to realizing I got an army behind me.
Yeah, absolutely. And over the long term, like the long game, I've definitely found that I'm a nice guy naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And people, I have the German frown. So when people
Sure.
people don't think that, but I, I've had a lot of people over the past few years where I go out and meet them and hang out with them or whatever, and they can tell.
Yeah.
They can tell if you okay, well, yeah, he's not here to manipulate me or mess with my head or whatever,
Right.
use me for something. He's a genuine dude, and I think if you're genuinely decent to people over the long term, it's like a reputation. It's like anything else. Like it goes with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you manipulate people, I mean, I think with urban environments, you can get away with so much because there's so many more people.
Well, the exchanges happen so quickly, and I think
Yeah.
that's a perfect example of what social media was for me. I mean, like I said, small town roots, small town kid, and then you have a video of this lift or that lift, and all of a sudden you've got 25,000 followers, and then it's 50,000. or whatever it is, and people are communicating with you like, oh my gosh, you're so awesome, 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 and you start to believe that. Well,
Yeah.
then that becomes very dangerous. And I think for me, I was looking for that support, and then that support just, that went too far for me. Like I let too much of it in, instead of, doing a little better and not necessarily believe in my own hype as much. But it's a weird place right now, because I still continue to put myself out there in the hopes that I can encourage people, help people, educate people in some way. But at the same time, like I told you, I kind of wrestle with that, because my happiness is not through a screen. It's really face to face. So I'm kind of in as inspired is kind of the right word by what you've done, and some other guys too that I follow that have really created a culture where they bring people together. They hold events and they do that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
we're actually looking to do some things like that. Just want to process them out fully, where, I mean, it's going to be food. Like, I'm just going to cook for everybody kind of
Nice.
thing. But yeah, I think the happiest I think I could be was like I said, cooking for people, probably camping. Red River Gorge is just up the road. I mean, why not have people out there do some cool shit at the gorge and cook them a meal, camp out that night, hike the next day? I mean, full spectrum love for Brandon Lilly right there. Like, that's a perfect day for me. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have no problem sharing that with people, and that really motivates me to get better and keep myself in shape and learn more about cooking, flavors, all that kind of stuff. And really to do that with my brother, to have him there and to have him cooking, because he can take salt, butter, and an egg and blow your mind. Like, the best food you'd ever eat with 3 ingredients. He's just one of those guys. But
Mhm.
I don't know, man. It's amazing to even say I want to do something with my brother. Just, I'm very, very thankful for those moments. Thankful that he's still here, I'm still here, and we're doing shit together. So, um, yeah, life is a weird thing.
It absolutely is. You bring. It's great to see things come around full circle. I mean, like I've often said that, when I was young, I didn't really get along with my dad
Sure.
at all, and then now it's like, if he calls me on Sunday and I don't answer, I get like harassment calls for like Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah, yeah,
Have our weekly talk.
yeah.
And now, he keeps tabs on my business and what I'm doing and whatever. And
That's probably the most hurtful thing to me, is that after my dad and I kind of reconciled everything, I would meet people in his life, and he was like, "Oh man, your dad never shuts up about you. He's so proud of you." And like, I knew that he was, but I was too proud to take his call. I was too proud to answer those messages and things. And I never gave him, like, I'm sitting over here pissed off because, like, my dad never said he loved me. My dad never said this, but I never gave him the chance to, like, once he made, I mean, he's just like me. He realized his mistakes. Like, you should see him with my son. It's fucking Care Bear. Like, he's the biggest wuss in the world when it comes
oh,
to my son,
yeah.
but it's awesome to see. And it's like, holy shit, if the hardest man, or one of the hardest men I've ever met, can become this guy,
Mhm.
then there's hope for us all. Like, there is hope for every
Yeah.
one of us, man.
Yeah.
And I think I used to dwell in a place, and I hear people dwelling in a place where they say there's no hope. There's hope. Every single day there's hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to a guy, actually. I did a podcast where I was the guest earlier this morning.
Yeah.
And the guy actually, his last name's Boudreau. And he, I think, has started a high school recently.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
actually in that game, like, he's actually, dealing with youth all the time. And he has a podcast where he asked me 11 questions that, like, all of his students ask.
Yeah.
And he asked me for advice, and one of the things that I think, especially young people, need to understand is perspective.
Oh yeah.
And that's a lot of what you're talking about. It's like, well, you'll get some perspective a little bit later, and because that's the number one thing I think with young people. Everything is right now, and right now is forever. Like,
Yeah.
that's everything is so important that's happening right now, and then, like, now it's like, I don't even remember high school.
Yeah.
you
No.
know?
Well, and like you say, it is really just perspective and experience and time. I mean, I made a post about that not too long ago. Perspectives and time. That's
Mhm.
what will change the world.
Yeah.
You can't erase ideas that were strong held today even if you put out factual, purposeful information, there's still going to be somebody that wakes up and denies the truth for what their belief is. That's
Sure.
just the way of the world. So it's going to take time for that generation or that group of people to cease to exist, cease to live, so that the next generation can have this little softening and this next softening and softening, or this harshening, whatever it is. It's like, hey, we've been too much of this for too long, so now we got to be more of this or whatever. But it just takes time. There's no universal knowledge. There's no universal agreement on what knowledge is. So, as long as there's people on Walmart.com or whatever that website is, and people are celebrating that, there's going to be somebody over here celebrating the Fortune 100 companies. I mean,
Right.
it takes all kinds, it takes all types, and not everybody's destined for greatness, but I think that people can excel in their lives and what they're destined to do,
Sure.
and that's really where I'm at. I mean, I wish somebody had told me you don't have to make $1 million to be happy, because I probably wouldn't have set my number on $1 million. I would have just looked at, okay, well, I have a home and I have a car and I have the things that I want. Don't really need $1 million to have those things, but so-and-so says I'm not worthy unless I have $1 million.
Right.
The freedom from that question or that train of thought was when a guy said, well, where are you at with $1 million? He's like, if you live in LA, it doesn't mean shit,
Oh yeah. Yeah. No,
He's
exactly.
Like, so he was like, get rid of these ideas of what things are. Just, in LA, you might need $10 million, but
Yeah.
you need to know what you want and where you want to be. And then you can start building a plan. Cause I think that's the one thing with this distraction generation, and I say that after hearing another very smart person use that term, but this distraction community, like I was talking with 2 clients that are in their early 20s, just asking, what are you planning for? What are you hoping for? What is your end goal with all of this? They're like, I just want to get bigger and stronger. Okay, well, we put 1/8 of an inch on your bicep and we put 5 pounds on your bench. Problem solves.
Yeah.
Aren't you happy? No, I'm not happy. Well, then what do you really want? Like, is it a 22-inch bicep? Is it a 500-pound bench press? Like, let's get serious about what we're defining success as, because I think we're getting lulled into this sleep where it's like, oh, self-improvement, I'm working on that, I'm getting better. And it's like, okay, that's cool, but what are we working towards, and where are the progress picks, or where are the progress steps, or whatever it is, like self-accountability.
Yeah.
Because I see people all the time. I mean, I literally just drove by somebody who I had a conversation with that I know 100%, they're dedicated to talking about this diet. I just passed them coming out of Wendy's with like a burger in their mouth. Like, you could tell the satisfaction, and it's fine. And I love this person and I'll give them hell for it. But the truth of the matter is, they're not dedicated to it. They're not dedicated to their rhetoric that they're spitting everywhere they go. Like Instagram, they're going to tell some sob story tonight about how they got sad and this, that, and the other. That's fine. Dedicated people can be sad. Dedicated people can have broken hearts. Dedicated people can have shitty days.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just stop the games of saying I'm truly dedicated. Let's just say what you are. I'm casually dedicated to this goal. And
I'm
then
interested in this.
It would be cool to reach this goal.
I think that goal's neat. Yeah.
I love that you said neat. I was about to say it would feel neat to hit this goal. But yeah, I think that's the real thing, is like, I don't care who you are, what you are, or who you choose to be, but at least have some spit in the game. Like, know what you're doing, know why you're doing it, and really, really dedicate to it. And I said spit in the game, not skin in the game. You should have stopped me there. That was
it sounded weird, but I didn't quite catch it. So
it sounded real weird once I got it. Like,
yeah.
I was going to say people spit in these reasons, but spit in the game, skin in the game, same thing. But I think people really need to sit down and ask themselves, am I being honest with what I'm saying? Like, am I being honest with what I'm living? Because for me, the truth is universal. That's the one thing, whether I want to call this telephone right here black or red or white or whatever it is, on the color spectrum, when I Google it, this is black. Like, that is a universally understood truth. And that's the way I have to work with myself. Like, what do I want to do? What gets me out of bed in the morning? What are my goals? What are my visions? And if I am chasing things that are out of line with that, it's just going to create this unrest. And kind of like the post I told you about, I don't want to go into that, but there was a post I made that after I made it, I just did not feel in line with it. And it did not feel good. And 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would have felt just fine with it, would have been negligent of it. But now it's kind of given me this weird thing, so I think it's just that indicator that I'm really paying attention to what I feel and what I think, and not necessarily jumping to any conclusions, but really kind of pondering on it and just letting it marinate so I can think, because I think that was the problem before. Everything was always reactionary. I never, ever thought my way through my problems. I never thought my way through situations. It was just like, oh, you need money? What's the easiest thing to do? Go sell some drugs. Okay, cool. Done in an hour. You know what I mean? And it just propels you further into these problems. Like, just be a thoughtful person, be a mindful person. Like, are you going to regret this tomorrow? Is this going to hurt someone tomorrow? Is it going to hurt someone by proxy tomorrow? You know what I mean? So it's just, it's a different way of looking at myself that has definitely radicalized the way I look at the world.
It just sounds intentional.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Intentional. I mean, I think a friend of mine, Richard Grannon, I think I read a quote by him, or I saw a little video that he did the other day, asking people, people who are happy and people who are unhappy and so forth is, you're probably going to be pretty satisfied with where you're at if, who you want to be is lining up with who you're being.
Yeah. And it's funny. Like, people are allowed to be whoever they want. I've yet to find the person, and I'm sure they're out there. My experiences are individual, but I really don't see the people out there that are, listen, I know that when I walk in a room, especially when I was bigger, people were going to have their say about me, whether I cared or didn't, right?
Oh, yeah.
Same as now. So I think as long as, like, you're not bothering anyone, if you're really true to yourself, whether that's having a certain, like a certain style of dress or a certain style of hair or lack of hair or whatever it is, I think if it's truly you, I see people that I know are forcing it, and I see people that I know that are owning it. And it's two different looks. It's two different walks. And not that I judge either differently. It's just, I hope that you make it. I hope that you finally get where you're going with this whole process, because it is a process. The style and the person that I am today will probably be different 6 months from now. Hopefully it's different from 6 months from now. And it will be this continuous evolution. And it's like, we have to forgive people for that and not be so critical of them in the moment, but kind of like you were talking about earlier, okay, give them time, but you have to have a synopsis. Like, if this person's always been a shitbag, you're going to have to prove to me that you're a pretty decent person for a long time before I can undo what I know about you as a shitbag. Sure. I've lived it. You've lived it. We've all lived it. Like, we've all made mistakes that we regret. We've said things that we regret. But I think if we understand about ourselves, we have to respect that about other people too, and not cast people out forever. Just say, this is who they are right now. Can't work with that. Just gonna, you know what I mean? And I think that's fair. I think that's fair, but it doesn't have to be cruel.
Yeah. I mean, I've been around people, because I get a lot of people coming to me for advice, and you do too, obviously. And some people are beyond my hope. And I'm like, I can't even be wrapped up in whatever you're going through or doing right now. That's for professionals, kind of thing. And but you might be okay in 5 years.
Sure.
Should come back around. But
do you ever find people that, I had a kid very recently, and I respected the question, and I just had to tell him, I was like, I'm not opposed to mentorship. I'm not opposed to that. But I do think that in some cases, and I think his was one, where he didn't need a mentor. A mentor was just going to be another person that he could point the finger at.
Right.
And I say this having said these very things to him. And I just think he needs to realize he can save himself. And we talked about that for a little bit. And he's like, yeah, but you've been through these things. And he said, guess what? You can text me. Like, if you have a problem, but I'm not going to give you a plan. I'm not going to give you my steps, because they are mine. The things that I have done were relative to the problems that I had and the mistakes that I made. Your problems, while they might look and sound the same, it's a different set of apologies. It's a different set of people that you need to make right with. It's a different set of justifications to yourself moving forward. I am not going to do these things again. I am not going to be this person anymore. I'm going to take care of these problems. And I think, dog's going crazy, but I think we all can do a little bit better in being honest with ourselves and really just working towards that person that we know that we are, that we're just afraid to be. I think that's the most beautiful human can be, is when they're truly themselves and they're right with themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And mentoring, it can bleed you dry too.
Oh
Like,
yeah, for sure.
it can bleed you dry, and something I learned in mentoring somebody that didn't work out eventually was that you can't you can't give someone a life on a silver platter and tell them how to do everything, because they don't, they don't appreciate it. They don't understand how to get there, and they don't,
That's
know, yeah,
that's a very good point. I think, to go back to skin in the game, I
yeah,
think that is a very valuable part of the process. Like knowing because you've done, understanding because you've seen,
hmm,
those things, they're more lasting. I can tell you not to touch that stove because it's hot.
right,
That's only going to increase the desire to touch the stove. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's kind of one of those deals. And I will be here. I'll be the phone call or the text message you need when you do mess up,
right,
but you can't beat yourself up and you can't live on that mistake. You just have to keep going and figure it out, because I can tell you the person that figures it out the first time is probably going to be the person that gets real miserable later on. You know what I mean? There's success is such a funny word, because like I said, I was successful as a power lifter and people excused all my other failures
sure,
because of that. So be wary of people who are super successful in one thing, because it doesn't necessarily indicate everything.
sure, sure. I mean, we're
Yes.
all whole people, and we need, there's always more to do. Someone was asking me about mentors actually this morning, and it's you always have different heroes as you grow. Because there's guys doing, this is the piece I need now. I have that piece. I need this next piece. So I need to look at this guy and what he's doing.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that that's fair. I mean, I think it's tiptoeing towards what I was saying before, was it was like consumption. But
Mhm.
for me, what you're saying is still in line with what I do. I don't necessarily disregard the fact that I'm not doing what you're doing anymore, so I don't have to leave you behind. Like I can still
Sure.
respect, you know what I mean? And that was the
Oh
mistake I
yeah.
made before, was
Oh
like,
yeah.
once I'd squeezed that orange to the end, I was already done with it and moving on. But now it's like, okay, I can keep coming back to this person as a resource, as a friend, as
Yeah.
someone who is valuable in my life, even though maybe the very thing that made us friends in the first place is it's no longer relevant. It's no longer needed. It's no longer a part of my life, whatever. But it doesn't mean that they don't have to be, or they don't have to be my friend because of that.
Oh sure.
I don't know why. I mean, listen, I sound crazy saying that, but I used to be that way. Like if I wasn't
Mhm.
about something, I wasn't about somebody.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah.
it was just like I always tried to live and breathe and bullshit that 1%er life, like, oh yeah, I'm all the way in, bro. Like if you're not all the way in, you're out. That kind of
Right.
deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, yeah. People who you connect with, if you really connect with them, I mean, they're it's good to see them.
absolutely.
I mean,
Oh,
that's why, like, I was filming this workout video the other day, and I ran into my old friend Bob, and we actually were, you know, worked. I met him boxing.
okay.
Like we were boxing together and whatever. And he doesn't box anymore. He doesn't
Yeah.
do that. But I met him boxing, and that's where we kind of connected, and whatever. And then he coaches some power lifters and stuff now, and does
Sure.
powerlifting. And a few months ago, I'm like, my squat isn't great right now. I'm going to come down and squat with Bob because it's
Yeah.
fun, because I want to see Bob.
For
And
sure.
hang out and do that. And we just ran into him at the same gym while we're filming that video. And it's just good to see it.
Yeah, I love some of the hugs I get these days, man. Like those long, just you can tell somebody needed it or they're glad to
Yeah,
see you, and I'm happy to get both. So
yeah, yeah.
I just think that life, man, if I could have talked to myself, probably I wouldn't have listened. You know what I mean? If I could
Sure,
go
sure.
back into, but if there's anybody sitting on that fence and listening, I really do. I think that there's so much good in the world, and it can look like anything. It can be anything. It can be anyone. It just live outside yourself is a great place to live, and I'm still selfish. I know that, like I still have my tendencies,
Sure.
but at least I'm recognizing that I am parts of those things and I utilize them. Like I know that if I'm working on a project, if I can just zone out and like tunnel vision, that means I'll get it done. And that means I can actually get back involved with family, friends, whatever it is, faster, rather than if I'm like just casually keeping them around and focused on this. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I try to deep dive when I go in and then get back out equally as fast and equally as deep. Try to put the phone down, try to put things away, and really be immersed in it. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, so what are you working on now? I mean,
right now, my biggest focus, one, as I told you, we kind of had a come together on the Be Legendary podcast, because I think I get a very, very positive experience when I talk to people like this. You have no idea how much I enjoy it. And I think it's an important space in a world where coaches have a lot of times been really put in a meat grinder. It's a stale and stagnant industry that is set up around archaic rules and ideals. And if my voice, if my ability to spread a message from a coach can enlighten other coaches, can expand what the industry becomes, that's the ego side of what I hope it becomes. But the reality of it is I just want to create good conversations to bring positive light to people and to Sornex. And then on that same note, people always ask me, what do you do for Sornex? Well, I'm Sornex Communications. I'm Sornex Community Building. That's what I try to do, is connect people and find people that work within our mold and our model of what it is, but also expand what that fringe looks like. And then that bleeds over into the Sornex outdoor stuff. So I'm just really, really appreciative of my opportunities with Sornex, and I'm trying to help them in whatever way that I can as a thank you to the assistance that they gave me. Because Bert, the community within there, that's the people I'm talking about. When I say I see people around throughout the year, multiple times a year, those are those people. Every single one of those people are within the Sornex Brotherhood or the Sornex community. And it just really is it's a valuable thing to me, and I just want to share it with as many people as I can, because it's done so much for me and it's done so much for my friends just by creating community for people that have oftentimes lacked it.
right.
But that's it. I mean, I don't, outside of, really understanding that I really want to write another book, but do so respectfully, I think, to the people that will read it, rather than just respectfully to the potential of a bank account,
Right.
that would be one that I really want to, I have to get right with it. I have to decide that this is what I'm going to do. Not like right now I've decided it's a good idea, but I've not decided to put pen to paper. For the last 4 or 5 years, honestly, kind of since my injury, I've tried a few times to write, and it's all felt dishonest. I mean, it's felt like an attempt to write rather than I'm prompted to write something, rather than I'm spilling myself. So I want to get back to where I'm bleeding on paper. I want to get back to where I can write that way openly and publish some things. I just signed up for I can't even remember what it's called now, but I just signed up for a blog site. Probably going to do so anonymously, just change the names, change the faces, but just get back in the habit of writing every single day. Because literally, man, I'll send you a note personally just to you, but there's a note that I've probably gone to 30 times, and all I've ever been able to write in it is I've watched this cursor blink for years. And that's where I get to. And I can't, and I think that was because I was so afraid of being dishonest. After I decided that I want to be clearly honest and to the point about everything that I say and do,
Right.
I was afraid that, okay, well, what if you are evolving and 3 months from now, this article, somebody can come back on it? Now I get it. And that's fair. I mean, I know that's the world we live in, but I've really given myself the distance, and I've really kind of solidified who I am, where I fit into my world, and how I kind of exist in the world around me, to understand that I'm not speaking to everyone. Everything that I write is not being judged by some grand scale that really matters. Like, if I can write something that is torn to shreds by 10 people, but one person gets some benefit from it, I really am okay with that. I just haven't found the subject matter that I want to talk about yet, because I'm talking a lot through the podcast. I'm talking a lot at events. So that's kind of quieted my need to write.
Sure.
But I enjoy writing. I enjoy the process of writing. I enjoy the exclusion of writing, the isolation of it, and I love the sound of it. Like, I love the phonetics of typing and writing with pen on paper. I mean, all of those things are just kind of like mildly stimulating to me. So I'm trying to be respectful of them now. I'm trying not to just write to fill space or to get a word count. I've done those things, and it's a little different now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, writing's hard.
Yeah.
It's definitely. I mean, I'm working on a book right now, and the hardest thing, just
You
from
write
my
very well, by the
experience.
way, like really well. Like, and
Thank
it's
you.
people, and it's recognition of people like yourself. It's like, okay, because of podcasts like this or because of
Mhm.
social media connections, it's like I would say that people put us on a similar pedestal,
Okay.
and it's like, okay, if Jack is doing these things and writing at this level,
Mhm.
not that I need to write at his level, but I need to dedicate to this writing at his level. I need to better myself because my peers are doing better, and
Sure.
I think that I've kind of taken the easy way out on a couple of projects when I should have pushed further and been
Mhm.
more demanding of myself. So that's what I want to do now. Again, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but saying that you're writing a book, just it's awesome. Like, I admire that because I have struggled so much with getting the ideas on paper. I have them, and obviously I can talk for forever, but when I try to put them down, it just becomes problematic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, uh, something I found recently with doing that is that if you're not sure exactly where you're going, it's really hard.
Right.
If you're not sure exactly, like I was working on a chapter. I spent the last like 2 months sitting from my keyboard, like, all
Yeah.
right, doing cool little aphorisms and things, but they weren't really coming together. And then I wrote a whole chapter in like a day and a half because I finally figured out where I was going.
Yeah. That's the
and
way it
uh,
works,
and then
man.
it just pours out.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just have to sit there for long enough until you figure it all out. And
That's kind of goes back to the Hank Williams Sr. thing. If it don't come out in 5 minutes, it ain't coming at all. You know what I mean? And
maybe, yeah,
that's, well, I mean, I think that's
yeah,
but for me, like,
sure.
I can sit there and will myself through 1,000 words or 1,500 words. I can do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
But those moments when it just like flows and it's like, oh shit,
Oh,
I went
that's magic. That's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
yeah,
happens. That's magic. I mean,
yeah.
a lot of the work of writing, it doesn't work like that. But like
All right.
the good stuff, that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
good stuff is right there. That's when it just comes out, and you're like, I don't even know where this is coming from. My key, like I always say, I can't handwrite. I can't read my own handwriting at all. And
Yeah,
but and I'm not even the best speaker, but like so, like at the good stuff, I'm thinking with my fingers at that
yeah,
point.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's actually just happening down there and it's not happening. It's barely happening up here. So it,
Yeah,
it's,
man.
it's an
That's
interesting
that's when
process.
it's fun when you're just flowing.
Oh yeah.
Oh, for sure,
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah. 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 That's the good stuff. For sure. Cool, man. All right. Well, I think it's a good wrap up.
Yeah, man. I'm actually, I'm very inspired from this, believe it or not. Just because I have a lot of respect for you, and I think you're doing a lot of good things, and I think that times in your life where you've been misunderstood, I think you've kind of stood the test of time, and it's pretty cool to see, man.
I'm hanging on.
That's right, and
Yeah.
hell yeah for doing it, and you're
Mhm.
doing it your way, and I respect the hell out of it.
Cool, man. Thank you. Well,
Uh,
it's great to finally connect and do this
yeah,
podcast.
for sure, man. I appreciate it.
Cool, man.